Hello and welcome to the world of Craig and Happy New Year. Now I am filming this in the middle of Twixmas. Yes, that bit in between Christmas and New Year where you don't quite know what to do with yourself. I'm sat here in my Christmas cave. Barbara's over there. Barbara? Yes, my Christmas tree is called Barbara. And if you haven't met Barbara, you can in one of my 2 Christmas videos, which are here on my channel. They're the last 2 videos I posted and I will link them down below. But I hope you've had a fantastic festive holiday time, whatever it is you've been up to, and that you had a great new year. It's 2024, can you believe it? I'm still in my sparkles. So you've already seen the title of this video, and this is about the definitive root shadow. Those high contrast root shadows that you're seeing all over social media. Well, I'm going to take you through the process and give you my top tips, but let's start with that actual in-salon process with this. Hello, yes, it's me, voiceover Craig. Now let's have a look at the gorgeous Claire's hair before we got into highlighting it. She's a regular model of mine and you can see she has some existing highlights, but we needed to lighten and brighten both the ends and refresh that root. I'll be sharing more details as to why exactly I place my foils like this later in the video, especially when I want a high contrast from the root shadow. I prepped the hair using K18 and as always, all of the products that I've used in the video will be listed down below in the description. I'm using Blondor Lightener for my lightening and I'm mixing it here with 13 Vol as Claire is a very light natural level 7 and her hair lifts super easily. And of course, I'm using Foil Me Foils. Now, let's get into some foil application. So as you've already seen from the thumbnail, Claire's final result has lots of dimension and maximum high contrast. And that's mainly because I've used a mix of different weaves within the application. Now I have loads of foil videos here on my channel. In fact, they're all in a playlist and I would really suggest that you go and check those out because they go very into detail as to why I exactly place my foils. This video is all about how we're going to shadow and the formulas that we're going to use, but please do check that playlist out for lots of foiling tips. For maximum lift with lower levels of peroxide, it's always foil for me. In fact, 90% of the partial lightening I do uses foils. Once the back were ready, I took those out, and then I waited for the front to lift up to around a level 9.5. We took those out, we shampooed and rough dried, and it's formula time. To keep things simple, I'm going to put both of the formulas up on screen now, but we will be getting into them in depth later on in the video. I've got a towel handy here to wipe my hands to make sure everything stays clean, and I'm just showing you the formulas. Then it's time to start our application. We want to get rid of those stitch marks using that deeper root shadow formula. Just a quick look at how everything's lifted and then let's start the application. You can see here that I've applied the first formula and I've dragged it slightly further down than you might think you need to. I'm leaving out the face frame with a waggy finger and this is creating a kind of teardrop shape across the head. Let's have another look at that placement. You can see here through the crown and the back of the head, I've dragged it down about 3 inches and through the front up near the face frame, just 1 inch. Then I go in with my second formula, my 9G, on my mids, leaving the ends and the face frame out. I apply 9G to those just for 5 minutes towards the end. We want to keep everything nice and light and bright on that face frame and the ends, whilst we have the depth at the root. When the processing time was up, we shampooed the hair. Now, I always think it's important to shampoo Shady Q Gloss from the hair, just to make sure you've removed all the pigment. We conditioned, and you can already see that depth at the root, the pop of the face frame, and the brightness on the ends, whilst everything is really blended. I will share some wavy pictures of Claire's hair with you when we get into things a bit later on, but for now, it's time to come back to me and the whats, the whys, and the wheres. Hello, I'm back, and that was the process for Claire's gorgeous, high dimension, high contrast root shadow. So that was exactly how I go about it. And just before we get into my key 3 points, yes, just check, my key 3 points for dimensional, high contrast root shadowing, how many times I'm going to say that, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you enjoy this and find it helpful, you know exactly what to do. There are hundreds of free educational videos. I don't believe in paywalls. I don't believe in subscriptions. I've always given all of my educational content, all of my content for free to you so you can take it and make it your own, whether you're a professional hairdresser or you're someone doing your hair at home. That's just the way it is. It's always been like that here on my channel. So your support is much appreciated, and of course, make sure you're subscribed because I have lots planned for 2024. Yes, there's already some videos lined up. We've got more shop ups, we've got some more tutorials, we've got some more swatches. There is loads that I have in my head. We've got a couple of new series that I've been planning as well whilst I've been off. So we'll get to all of that. But first of all, in my top tips for root shadowing, when you want that high contrast, the first thing would be lift. So you need to lift the hair that you're highlighting light enough so there's enough contrast between the natural hair and the lifted hair, and then whatever it is you go in and shadow with. We're going to get into that in a second. And in my opinion, as you saw in the video and you saw in the process clips, in my opinion, the best way to get the most consistent lift is using foil, because that way you can use lower volumes of peroxide, which protects the hair integrity. Of course, you would use something like K18 to ensure that the integrity is going to be kept really good throughout the process. But you want to get that maximum lift, okay? For example, Claire's hair was a natural level 7. She's naturally very light. She's got very pale blue eyes. Her hair lifts really easily. And I lifted her hair to about a level 9.5. Some of it was a 10. Some of the ends were a 10. I know Claire's hair really well, so I knew that if I overlapped some of the lightener to get the extra lift, and I was using something like K18 to protect the hair, everything was going to be fine. It's important when you're lifting hair that you know the hair and you know the products that you're using. So top tip number 1, make sure that you get enough lift so once you've done your lovely high contrast root shadowing, that you're going to get the contrast between the two. Simple. Silly me, there was something I forgot there. Yes, I plan all of these educational videos out very concisely, and I just looked at my iPad over there by the coffee machine, and there was one very important thing I forgot to share, and that is, why do I lift? You might be thinking to yourself already, having watched the process, why do I lift the highlights right up to the root? Well, obviously the face frame, you want that to be fresh and you want that to always be really up to the root, and then you can shadow it down softly or shadow it down for more high contrast. There are other root shadowing videos here on my channel. I'll link something down below, maybe my hair color tutorials playlist down below. Everything is in playlists here on my channel. So you always obviously want your face frame to go up to the root. But why have I highlighted right up to the root through the parting and through the rest of Claire's partial highlighting? And that's for the simple reason that I want my clients to get great value for money. So I've used a demi-permanent colour, use Shades EQ Gloss, to shadow Claire's hair down. We'll get into that in a second. It's all coming here in this video. But it's important for me as a hairdresser and as a professional that I give clients value for money. So that's why I take the highlights right up to the root, because as the demi-permanent colour fades, Claire's highlights are still closer to the root, so the grow out lasts longer. I hope that makes sense. I just always feel it makes much more sense to highlight up to the root and then to shadow things down. That's my own process. If you're a hair pro, you might like to do things in a different way. That's completely fine, but that's how I do things to give clients value for money. Coming in at number 2, we have formula. Okay, so the formula obviously is going to be important to get the result that you want, the desired result. I'm going to put Claire's formula up here on the screen. Yes, on the screen up here, so that you can all see that again, just in case you didn't catch it throughout the process. So formula is super important, okay? And I'm going to say before we get into formulas, I would only ever, and this is a really big point for me personally, I would only ever use a demi-permanent product to root shadow and to tone hair. And I know that some of you won't agree with that as hair pros, and that's completely fine because we all do things the way we like to do them and there are no right or wrongs. But the reason I wouldn't use a permanent colour is because you could get into problems later on down the line. Even if you use an oxidative permanent hair colour with a lower volume of developer. For example, I know that Coliston has their pastel developer, and they do say that you can root shadow with that, you can tone with that, and you can, and I know hairdressers that do. But when something is that pigmented, even if you mix it with a gentler developer, gentler peroxide, you could end up leaving a stain or depositing slightly too much colour. For example, if the person that you're using it on, if you're using it on yourself, if you have a lot of body heat and your head is very hot, then good for you. But if your head is very hot, then you might shift the base very slightly, okay? Because of the ammonia content, and then the pigment's going to deposit more. So you could get into all sorts of problems. And I know a lot of people like a very pigmented root shadow, and that's completely fine. But me personally, I only use anything that is a demi. And I do use Colour Touch sometimes with the gentle developer. I wouldn't use the intense developer, but in this instance, I used Shady Q Gloss. Now, how do you pick what formula to use? Well, first of all, you need to decide whether you want it to be cool or warm, and that can depend on the base that you're working on and the highlights, how light you've lifted them, okay? Obviously, I have a video here on my channel that's all about how to pick the perfect shade of toner, and I'll link that down below. It's a great video. It's had some really great feedback. I'm really chuffed that you've all found it very helpful. But in Claire's case, Claire is a natural level 7, and I lifted her highlights up to a 9.5 to a 10. And because I wanted the high contrast, I then formulated my toner to be around a level 7.5, a level 7. Shady Q Gloss is a very translucent line, so I know, because I've used it for a long time, that it's not going to go really heavy and dark. Some cream-based semi-permanent colours can be more opaque. They have more opacity, so they can process to look a little bit darker. Know the products that you use. I repeat that loads and loads of times here on my channel. Know the products that you use and know the results that you're going to get the best results. So let's just mix things up a little bit here. Say for instance, your client is a level 6 and you've lifted the highlights to a 9, then I would formulate your root shadow to be somewhere in the middle at around a level 7. If you formulate, because you want that contrast, if you formulate your root shadow to be a level 8, you're not going to get as much contrast, and you will still see the foil stitch marks very slightly, depending on what brand of colour you're using, how you've applied it, etc, etc. But my general rule for picking a formula is obviously decide if you want it to be warm or cool, remembering that cool tones, when you're depositing colour, always look slightly deeper than a warm tone, because cool colours absorb the light and warm colours reflect the light, just like my top. So decide whether you want it to be cool or warm, sidetracked. And then a good rule of thumb is look at the colour of the natural base colour of the hair you've lifted, then look at the level of the highlight and formulate somewhere in the middle. Obviously, the more contrast you want, the deeper that formula would go, and the softer you want the root shadow, the lighter the formula would go. Simple. I keep saying simple in this video. So that's number 2. Let's get into number 3, which is all about application. So application. Now this is key. This is just as key as the formula and the lift, really. That all of the 3, it's the trifecta of root shadowing. I have a friend with me. Hello. I've just grabbed them out of the cupboard over there. A lot of my dollies are away in storage outside, but this one is in the cupboard. They've got some nice edges on here, but I could just demonstrate what you saw in that process video as well. And obviously they have very bright hair, but I'm sure you can imagine if this hair was highlighted, just to show you the kind of patterns. So application it's really important that you look at the hair and the results from the highlights and you decide exactly where you want the shadow to be. On Claire's hair, I dragged the application further down the head, okay? And that's because I wanted that high contrast. And I'll insert some video here at the same time. But you can see that it was very much a teardrop shape. So it was dropping down towards the crown and the back of the head, where it would be very minimal at the front where the face frame was, because I wanted that to be the brightest. Probably about 3 inches down the head here. And that's what gives you that very high dimensional, high contrast, says it again, root shadow. Let me just pop them down for a second. I'm back. So that really is the key, is how far you drag. And obviously root shadows can be called root drags, colour mounts, root taps. There's lots of different names for them. Hairdressers, hair professionals, we like to use a lot of jargon, and that's completely fine. I'm all here for you can call it a supercalifragilisticexpialidocious if you want, as long as your clients know exactly what you're doing, because then they know what to ask you for, so there's no confusion. We all remember, don't we, the ombre and balayage situation from a few years ago? Yes. So be very clear about what it is you're doing, regardless of what you call it. So it's all about really how far you drag it down. And your formula, that formula that sits in the middle of your client's natural base or your natural base, and then the lightened hair, and then where you actually apply that. Some other top tips I would say: keep a towel at hand to wipe your hands in between. You don't want to transfer this formula that's going onto the root onto the mids and ends, because as I did with Claire's hair, her hair had that level 7-ish formula at the root. Then it was 9G that was used on the mid-lengths and ends. And then on the very, very ends, I just put the 9G through that and through the face frame just for literally a couple of minutes. I don't do that all the time, but in this instance, when someone's got a lot of lift naturally, or their hair's very light naturally and their hair's lifted very well, then I will just touch it with the gloss. I would always advise that when you're using any demi-permanent colour, you follow manufacturer's guidelines with processing. But with Claire's hair being, a level 10.5 in places, I just wanted to touch it with that level, with that 9G. Just for a couple of seconds, well, a couple of minutes, actually. Get your facts right, Craig. Just for a couple of minutes, just to give it the shine and a little bit of tone. So wipe your hands in between so you don't transfer the colour, and take your time as well. Take a bit of time placing the product onto the hair exactly where you want it to get the best results. Just to add to that very briefly, that I would go in with my first formula, the root shadow, whether it is high contrast or a soft one. I would get a softer formula, a lighter formula. I would go in with that first globally, and then I would go in with my formula on my mids, and then I would go and do all of that, and then I would apply to my ends. And then if I'm going to process for the full 20 or however long the product you're using processes for, that's what I would do. So it would be in stages like that. And I kind of call that zone toning. I always have. Something I've done for a very long time, for like 20 years. It's just that it became very fashionable and we're all doing it. So that's how I would go through that process, and that's my top tips for root shadowing. You can't see because I have a new phone. I film all my videos on my phone and I edit them all on my phone as well. And you can't see, you can kind of make it out because I have cinematic mode on this phone. So I have my Christmas background, which will only be with me for another couple of days. But I hope that you've all I hope you found that helpful, first of all. And if you did, you know exactly what to do. But I hope you've all had a great start to the year. I am so excited about everything that's coming this year. I'm so chuffed that my channel is growing and my subscribers are growing. And I really, really appreciate all of you for watching this and for giving me some fantastic support. As always, if you have a question regarding what's been in this video or a general hair question, or leave them down below. I reply to everybody. I love your comments. I love getting your comments. I love reading them. I love replying to all of you, helping if I can. I can't often give you very specific formulas, unfortunately, because I can't see your hair. So that's just the way that it is. But I do love your comments and I reply to all of them. So like I've already said, you have a brilliant start to the new year. You take care, and I'll see you all in the next one.